The bedroom door stood ajar, leaving a gap of precisely 3 inches. Why this seemingly insignificant detail was the catalyst that shattered me, I couldn't explain, but it was. Delilah was meticulous about closing that door, every single time, night after night, with unwavering consistency. Even during our most heated arguments, even when she was utterly exhausted and unable to utter a word, she would make it a point to cross the room and firmly shut the door before retiring for the night. She claimed that leaving it even slightly open made her uneasy, as if unseen eyes were peering in. But on this particular night, it was different. The door was ajar. I stood transfixed in the hallway for what felt like an eternity, my gaze fixed on that sliver of an opening. My heart was pounding erratically, a disconcerting rhythm of skips and frantic rushes. A single thought echoed in my mind. Shut it. Just shut the blasted thing, Silas. But I was paralyzed, unable to even bring myself to step into the room, not out of fear of what might be lurking inside, but because I already knew what was absent. Delilah herself. Her duffel was missing. The distinctive one, crafted from woven blue canvas that she reserved for weekend getaways and visits to her family. Her portable speaker was gone from the bedside table. Her fuzzy socks were nowhere to be seen. But the closet, it was open. Open just enough to feel deliberate. A message conveyed through an omission. Open enough to feel like an accidental slip that revealed the truth. That eerie sensation when the silence is deafening. A stillness that vibrates like a high-tension wire. That's what permeated the house. She had once again cited exhaustion as her excuse. "Silas, I simply can't tonight. All I crave is sleep. Please don't make a fuss," she had pleaded. And like a naive fool, I complied. I nodded submissively and offered to occupy myself with the tedious task of folding laundry downstairs. Of course, I folded nothing. Instead, I perched on the floor in the laundry room, my senses on high alert, straining to detect any sound. The pipes groaned. The freezer emitted a low hum. The neighbor's terrier yapped intermittently. And then the telltale sound of the front door. Not a slam, not a squeak, but a soft, deliberate click, as if someone were attempting to move stealthily. I cautiously emerged into the living room a mere 10 minutes later. She had vanished, gone without a trace. Her phone remained buzzing intermittently on the kitchen counter, but her car keys were missing. The backup set, the one she concealed in a ceramic pot on the patio, not on the wall rack, the key she believed I was oblivious to. So I ascended the stairs, and that's when I noticed the slightly ajar door, a silent mockery. I wish I could recount an act of bravery, a moment where I seized the keys and pursued her, calling her bluff. But alas, I remained rooted to the spot, a pitiful extra in the drama of my own life, fixated on that crack in the closet door, realizing I had become the unseen observer. She returned 3 hours later, unaware that I was awake, oblivious to the fact that I had observed the open door, the missing socks, the absent speaker. She headed directly to the bathroom, humming to herself, a melody that suggested an abundance of vitality. As she slipped into bed, I feigned a restless stir. She whispered, "So sorry I got back so late." Said the girl's dinner went long. I remained silent. She shifted onto her side and drifted off to sleep. I, however, remained awake throughout the night, my gaze fixated on the closet door. And as the sun began to rise, I made a decision that I hadn't entertained in over a year. I withdrew my support. Not in a dramatic fashion, devoid of financial cutoffs or legal threats. I simply disengaged emotionally. I ceased inquiring about her meetings. I refrained from massaging her shoulders when she complained of stress. I abandoned the practice of reminding her to eat. I ceased offering excuses, even to myself. And that's when the transformation occurred. She acquired a surge of energy. An inexplicable radiance emanated from her. She began rising before her alarm, attending cycling classes, acquiring new attire. Her texting frequency increased. Her laughter became more frequent. She even started humming as she prepared meals. The perpetual exhaustion had lifted. She was only tired for me, never for him, and I had yet to even make his acquaintance. I began to notice subtle alterations, the kind that elude the cinematic portrayal of infidelity. No traces of lipstick on collars, no enigmatic hotel receipts, just a gradual erosion of the customs that once held significance. Her coffee cup, for instance. For the past 7 years, I had prepared her coffee each morning, leaving it beside her phone. 1 cream, 2 sugars, no lid. She loathed lids. She would greet me with a smile that made me think it was the highlight of her morning. But one day she disregarded it. She poured it out like it was tap water. No expression of gratitude, no fleeting glance, nothing. As if it had always been her chore. I remained silent. The following day I refrained from making it altogether. She didn't inquire as to why. And that silence spoke volumes, conveying more than any tumultuous argument could have. Then came the mirror revelation. She presumed I was still asleep. I wasn't. I was in the hallway, hunched over, tying my shoes when the faint strains of music drifted from the bathroom. A rhythm unfamiliar to me, something upbeat and lively. I approached the door, intending to inquire about breakfast, but I hesitated. She was positioned before the mirror, actually twirling, clad in a new emerald blouse, more form-fitting than anything she would ever wear in my presence, and applying lip gloss. Her head tilted slightly, a smile gracing her reflection, her fingers tracing her neck. She didn't notice me, and I realized that smile was not for me. It hadn't been for quite some time. The realization struck me with a peculiar ache, not heartbreak, but a sense of being forgotten, as if witnessing someone rehearse a scene from which I had been excluded. On that same day, she requested a loan of $300. She claimed that her colleague was collecting funds for a team dinner, and she wanted to contribute generously. I transferred the money, of course. Later that evening, she informed me not to wait up. She said they were probably going to bar hop after. The way she said it, overly casual, overly rehearsed, bothered me. So, when she departed, I did something uncharacteristic. I violated her privacy and scrutinized her phone. She had carelessly left it charging on the windowsill in the kitchen. No passcode. She must have presumed I would never dare. And until that moment, she had been correct. I refrained from delving into her messages or emails. I merely tapped on the map's history. I'm uncertain what I anticipated. Perhaps a restaurant name, a shopping center. But there it was. Cedar Ridge Apartments. Unit 221. Saved twice. Once from 2 weeks prior. Once from that very day. I sank to the floor, the trash bin my only companion, my gaze locked on the address. The kind of complex that exuded a veneer of respectability on the exterior, but housed units rented by the hour. My stomach churned, my jaw clenched so tightly that I feared my teeth would fracture. But I refrained from confronting her. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was not prepared. I required more than a mere pin on a map. I craved certainty. So I waited. The following day, I feigned illness, citing migraines. I spent the morning pacing restlessly. At 3:52 p.m., she sent me a text. "Don't forget the recycling. Love you." 2 kissing face emojis. She hadn't used kissing face emojis in over a year. That alone almost brought me to tears. By 5:15 p.m., she left the house, still clad in the green blouse I had witnessed in the mirror, and for the first time, I pursued her. I allowed 10 minutes to elapse before embarking on my own journey to Cedar Ridge Apartments. My palms were slick with perspiration. I parked behind a broken fence, my view partially obscured by a crack in my windshield. I reassured myself that I had no intention of entering the building. I merely desired to identify the vehicle that would pick her up. I didn't even know what he looked like. But when she emerged from the lobby 15 minutes later, not accompanied by a man, but alone, and smiled as she composed a text, I realized she didn't require a ride. He was already in the room. and she exuded energy, her laughter echoing as she texted, her eyes sparkling, her posture erect, free from the exhaustion I had grown accustomed to seeing. It was as if she had discovered a power source that I could never provide. Meanwhile, I remained in my vehicle, my grip so tight on the steering wheel that my knuckles turned white, fighting the urge to vomit. She wasn't seeking adventure, she was seeking an escape from me. And I was oblivious as to how long it had been occurring. All I knew was that the connection we once shared had dissolved, and it had been replaced by Unit 221. I remained awake throughout the night. I didn't even attempt to sleep. I simply sat in the passenger seat of my car in the garage, my gaze fixed on the oil stains on the floor, contemplating how the same woman who had once wept with joy over our matching snowshoes was now checking into apartment units under her maiden name. That revelation stung. I neglected to mention earlier that on the map's history, when I zoomed into the listing for the apartments, I noticed her Apple ID name adjacent to the saved location. Except it was no longer her married name, not the one on our mortgage or the one on our wedding invitations. She had reverted to her maiden name, Willow Thorne. It's difficult to articulate why that impacted me more profoundly than the apartments themselves, but it did. It felt as if she had already mentally erased me, as if she had packed her identity into a suitcase weeks prior, leaving behind only the version of herself that I was willing to accept. The following day was a Sunday. She prepared French toast, actual French toast. She hadn't made breakfast in ages. She even hummed as she tended to the frying pan. I stood there, observing her navigate the kitchen as if nothing was amiss, as if she wasn't the same woman who had spent the previous night in a low-rent apartment with another man. At one point she smiled at me and inquired if I wanted syrup. I nodded, and as she passed by, I detected a scent, a familiar one. It was my aftershave, not something similar, not a generic imitation. My aftershave. I keep it in the cabinet under the sink in the guest bathroom. She never touches that one, but it was mine. I recognized it by the subtle, mossy note at the base. I'd worn it since I was 27. No one else I knew used it, and suddenly it was emanating from her cardigan. I longed to inquire, to scream, but my throat constricted. Instead, I asked, "New washing powder?" She glanced over. Maybe. It wasn't. That moment triggered a shift within me. I knew that if I didn't take action swiftly, I would lose my mind. So, the next morning, while she was still asleep, I drove back to the apartments. I'm uncertain what I hoped to achieve. Perhaps a front desk attendant who would offer gossip, or a housekeeper with loose lips. Instead, I encountered something far worse. I remained in my vehicle for half an hour, observing. Around 9:45 a.m., a man emerged from the side entrance. Tall, athletic, mid-30s, perhaps a little older, a neatly trimmed beard, polished suede footwear. And he was wearing my aftershave. Not a mere passing trace, he was enveloped in it. And not as if he had sprayed it on himself. It clung to his attire in a way that suggested intimate contact. Prolonged, intimate contact. He entered a sleek black sedan, drove off, never glancing around, confident and composed, like a man who had already achieved victory. I pursued him. Yes, I am aware that it sounds pathetic, but I needed to know. I had to observe the man who now elicited her smiles, the man who banished her tiredness. I tailed him for 20 minutes until he pulled into a gated townhouse complex, one of those upscale communities with landscaped grounds and concierge services. I parked across the street and watched as he entered the building. No keycard, no packages. He just strolled inside as if he lived there. So I waited. At some point I realized I had been sitting there for nearly 2 hours, my grip on the steering wheel so tight that I felt it could prevent me from shattering. I began to notice the details around me, the rapid movement of the clouds, the frigid air seeping through the window sills, the lingering odor of gasoline emanating from a nearby truck. And then he reappeared, but not alone. Willow, clad in the same emerald blouse. She laughed at something he said and playfully tapped his arm. Then she embraced him. Not a platonic embrace, not a casual goodbye, but a prolonged, eyes-closed embrace, the kind that suggested they were in no rush to part. An embrace I hadn't experienced in years. She never looked at the street, never noticed my car. She simply entered the black sedan with him and drove off. I sat there, stunned. And for the first time, I realized that she wasn't simply cheating on me. I was the man she was cheating on him with, the man she returned home to out of obligation, the placeholder, the excuse. That night, she came home as usual, pecked me on the cheek, and inquired about my dinner preferences. I mumbled a response. She paid no attention. She was already engrossed in her phone, and all I could think was, he wears my aftershave, he holds her as I once did, and she allows it. I don't know how long I sat in the parking lot after they drove away. The truth is, time had begun to blur. Hours no longer felt like hours. They felt like static, a vibration behind glass. I wrestled with the possibility that I had misinterpreted what I had witnessed, that it was all a cruel, elaborate dream. But it wasn't. I knew her face. I knew that blouse. I knew that laugh. And I knew she hadn't laughed like that around me since before the pandemic. That evening, I attempted to act normal. That's what one does when one loses control. One performs as if everything still makes sense. I dusted the hallway, turned on a random show, and asked her if she wanted a glass of wine. She declined, stating that she was cutting back, that she wanted to feel lighter. That word, lighter. I don't know why it resonated so profoundly. It was like a tiny, inadvertent confession, as if she had been carrying the weight of me, and now she was striving to float away. We sat in silence. She was engrossed in her phone, smiling at something. I foolishly inquired, "What's funny?" She looked up. "Oh, just a meme." She angled the screen toward me. It depicted a cartoon raccoon carrying a trash bag labeled "Me taking out emotional baggage, like I'm not going to dig through it later." She laughed. "That's so me, right? Classic." And then she uttered those words I will never forget, "unless you're the baggage." She said it while laughing, a throwaway line, without a pause. But I sat there, frozen. Was she joking? Was it intended as dark humor? Sarcasm? I stared at her, awaiting a wink, a grin, anything to indicate that I had misheard. Nothing. Just silence and her gaze returning to her phone. And I realized in that moment that she wasn't merely tired of me. She was amused by me. I had become background noise, something to tease, something to reference as a burden in casual conversation. I remained silent that night. I merely retreated upstairs early and brushed my teeth with a numb hand. I scrutinized my reflection in the mirror for what felt like an eternity, searching for something within myself. I found nothing. She entered later and slipped into bed without a word. She rolled onto her side, pulled up the blanket, and within moments, her breathing settled into a slow, gentle rhythm, a portrait of peaceful contentment. Meanwhile, I remained wide awake, replaying the scene in my mind like a detective trying to solve his own crime. The apartments, the aftershave, the black sedan, the embrace, her laugh, the trash bag meme. That was when I realized I could no longer endure it. Not the infidelity, for I could almost tolerate the infidelity. What I could no longer tolerate was being erased while still being present. So, I did something I hadn't done in years. I messaged her friend, not one of the fake coworker friends, but a genuine one. Abigail, Delilah's college roommate and former maid of honor. The woman who used to tease me like a sister, but had abruptly ceased contact a few years prior. I sent her a single message. "Abigail, I need to know the truth about Delilah. Please, I'm not okay." She didn't respond that night, but the following morning at 6:48 a.m., while Delilah was still in the shower, I received a reply. "Silas, I can't say everything, but check the Willow Creek Inn." Willow Creek Inn? Delilah's boss owned a holiday location out of town. I remembered her mentioning it once, saying they used it for creative retreats and silent resets. I never thought twice, but now, it had weight. I waited until Delilah departed for work. I mentioned the possibility of taking a stroll later. She smiled as if she wished I'd enjoy it, but she failed to ask for details. I headed north. 3 hours later, I arrived at the gate of a glass-fronted cabin with an empty sedan parked out front. No signs of life. I got out slowly, my legs buzzing with nerves, and then I heard it. Laughter. A man's voice emanating from the back deck. I walked around the side of the house, my hands shaking, my throat parched. I could barely breathe. And then I saw her, lounging on a chaise, a wineglass in hand. Beside her, shirtless, was him, the same man from the apartments, my aftershave, my wife. I didn't confront them. I turned around and left. Not out of cowardice, but because if I had remained, I would have been unable to remain silent any longer. And once I opened my mouth, I knew something within me would shatter irrevocably. I didn't cry on the way home, not because I was maintaining composure, but because I felt nothing. I experienced neither pain, nor hatred, nor even confusion. It was as if someone had hollowed me out from the inside, leaving only a shell behind the wheel. The most unsettling aspect was how normal everything still appeared. The trees, the gas stations, the people driving by with coffee in hand, tapping on their steering wheels to the rhythm of songs I couldn't hear. The world hadn't ceased spinning simply because my life had crumbled. That made it feel even more surreal. When I returned home, the living room reeked of floral cleaner. She must have scrubbed earlier. A neatly folded throw lay draped over the couch. One of our ancient photograph frames had been adjusted slightly, just enough to catch the afternoon light, revealing a picture of us at Yosemite, her hand resting on my chest. I was smiling too wide. She was gazing into the distance. She came back at 5:54 p.m., laden with groceries. Relaxed, full of energy, she recounted how the market had been packed and they were out of the vanilla syrup she favored. I nodded, barely. She kissed my cheek and said, "Glad you got some air. You seem lighter." That word again, lighter. I excused myself and retreated upstairs. My stomach was a knot of nausea, but I still hadn't uttered a word. That night, while she was asleep, I turned on her phone. My movements were mechanical, as if my fingers already knew the sequence. And that's when it happened. She had left a message open. An iMessage, unsent. It read, "I feel suffocated in this house. He's so sweet. It makes me sick. I can't even bear the way he looks at me. He folds my clothes like a husband from the 1950s. I don't want to hurt him, but I want out. I want you." It was intended for him. The timestamp read 1:07 a.m. She had typed it the night after I brought her soup when she claimed to be coming down with something. She had stared at that screen, consumed by the desire to escape me, while I dabbed perspiration from her forehead and placed a cool cloth on her chest. I closed the phone slowly and quietly. And then I reached a decision I never thought myself capable of making. I would cease pretending, but I wouldn't confront her. Not yet. I wanted to see how far she would go. I wanted to discover whether she would attempt to deceive me, even when the truth was inches from my face. So, the following day, I devised a test. I suggested that I might visit my sister in Boise for a few days. She didn't even blink. She nodded. In fact, she stated, "You should. That might be really good for you. Not us, but you." I departed the next morning at 5:45 a.m., sharp. I drove 20 minutes outside of town, circled back on the service road, and parked my car behind the old club, a place we used to go before the world got quiet between us. I walked home. She left it unlocked. The house was still empty. I waited, and at 10:50 a.m., I heard the door. She entered with him. I watched through the gap between the wall and the stairs. She laughed. He put his bag down, the same dark bag I'd seen at the cabin. She asked him if he wanted iced tea. He declined. She kissed him, like I didn't exist, like this was their place. I waited until they went upstairs. Then I crept out again, holding my breath. When I got back to the car, I sat still for a full hour before driving to a motel on the edge of town. I didn't check in. I just parked there and thought about the man in my home, sleeping in my bed. She kissed him like I never existed. It was no longer a question of if she loved someone else. It was a question of whether she had ever truly loved me. I didn't go home for 3 days. I slept in my car, curled in the back seat. I showered once. I ate snacks and drank too much coffee. I didn't check my email. I didn't answer texts. She didn't call once. On the third night, I drove through our street with the lights off. I slowed down when I passed the house. Every window was dark except one, our bedroom. The blinds were half drawn. Then I saw movement, a silhouette passing in front of the window, arms lifting, and that was when I realized I couldn't stay gone forever. She'd write the ending herself. No one would ask what led up to it. No one would ask who she had in our bed while I was praying for the sun not to rise. So I went back, not with a plan, not with revenge in my heart, just with a promise to myself. Watch everything. Say nothing. When I opened the door, the house smelled like apples. She was in the kitchen, holding a mug. When she saw me, she tilted her head and said she was starting to get worried. It was such an absurd sentence, but I just said, "Yeah, sorry." She didn't ask where I'd been. She asked if I wanted bagels. I said, "I'm tired." Later that night, she knocked on the bedroom door. I was lying on top of the covers. She opened the door and said, "Silas, do you want to talk?" It was the voice she used when she was rehearsing a conversation. I sat up slowly. "Talk about what?" She walked in, arms crossed tightly. "About us? I feel like something's been off." I wanted to scream, but I said the softest thing I could manage. "Do you love me?" She paused. Then she smiled. "Of course I do." She just stood there, waiting for me to believe it. I nodded and felt calm. The next morning, I found her phone unlocked. I tapped it open and went straight to her photos. I found a video. No faces, just her voice. In the background was our bedroom, and at the end of the clip, her voice whispered something quiet. "Don't wake the husband." The day after I watched that video, I stopped pretending. I was the prop she hadn't replaced. Everything felt artificial. The sound of her voice, the fridge, the framed photos. I watched her. She didn't notice. That night, I asked her, "When did it start?" She said, "Why would you ask that?" "Because I need to hear what kind of liar you are." She smiled. "You're not exactly blameless. You disconnected. You stopped trying. You were always quiet. Tired." She was calling me tired. She'd built an entire reality where I was the one who failed. I was the one left unloved. She stood up. "I'm going to bed." That night, I sat in the guest room. I found a video from our marriage, a clip of us building a bookshelf. I heard her voice. "I don't know. He asked tonight." "No, I didn't say anything. I think he already knows, but I can't tell him. Not yet. I miss you too. He's just fragile." That was when I knew she had moved on long before she touched him. I realized something had changed inside me. She wasn't going to get the ending she wanted. It didn't end with a fight. The next morning I made breakfast. I made 2 plates. I didn't say anything. She didn't either. When she got up to leave, I asked, "Do you still want this marriage?" She said, "I don't know." And I felt calm. That afternoon, I packed a bag. Not out of spite. I chose a few things. I left everything else. When she came home, I was waiting. "I'm going to go away for a while. Don't worry about me. You can have the house." Still no answer. So I walked past her into the evening air. I stayed in a cabin for a few weeks. I didn't have to filter through anxiety. I started laughing again. A bird hopping. I looked in the mirror and my eyes looked alive. I started talking to people, and I stopped wondering if she missed me because I knew who I was. I wasn't a man too quiet to be loved. just a man who had a voice. And the peace didn't come from confrontation.